Hi, folks. Welcome to The Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas. I'm Bela Musitz, a former three-time entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and now the recently retired David D. Ray Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Clarkson University.
And coming to you from Münster, Germany, I'm Mike Wasserman, Professor of International Management at the Münster University of Applied Sciences. First, thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoy listening to this as much as we enjoy creating it. Second, a lot of you ask me, why am I doing a podcast? And Bela and I talk a lot about this, and it's certainly not to make money. The two of us are here. We like to learn from smart and interesting people about how the world's changing, how innovation and entrepreneurship are changing. And we like to overlay our observations and compare them with the lessons that we've each learned over 3+ decades as entrepreneurs, investors, managers, and professors. To do this, we've put together our network of interesting friends, former students, and business partners, along with other people we've met recently to bring you interesting stories, ideas, and insights into innovation, entrepreneurship, and the people that take unconventional paths to find happiness at work and in life.
This week, I spoke to Jeremy Redman. We had a nonlinear conversation about entrepreneurship, leadership, culture, and how to define, build, and adjust them in as an organization evolves. I really enjoyed the conversation with Jeremy, and we had a really good time sort of riffing on various different topics. So, Mike, what was one of the things that sort of jumped out at you as something our listeners should tune in on?
Well, this was an interesting take on an age-old question, and Jeremy really focused on what are the keys to effective leadership and how can one learn or develop these. So I think that's something for the audience to kind of key in on, and how does he define leadership and how does he think that leaders can develop. And then the second related point was about culture. And how can an organization develop an effective culture in terms of the people and the processes and how people make decisions? So I think there will be a lot here that the listeners will be able to take away from.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. I think those were two key points, certainly ones that I would focus on. So with that, let's jump right into the interview with Jeremy Redman. Hello, listeners. It's Bela here. This week's guest is Jeremy Redman. He is a founder of several companies and is I will say, a Michigan State accounting dropout. Is that okay to say, Jeremy?
That's okay. That was one of the biggest things. Sorry to interrupt the intro, but that was one of the biggest times where I felt like I was going to become a leader. Yeah. Which is when I dropped out of grad school.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, no.
No, that's all good. Hey, there's plenty of, and being in higher ed like I am, I always have this debate with Jeepers, are we doing something right or are we doing something wrong? So I would say the only thing wrong, the reason I dropped out really was because they told me that, one, they think negotiation, they thought that was a class worth paying thousands of dollars for. Yeah. And then two, I vehemently think that more often than not, leaders can be taught by trial and fire. Yes. But I really believe that. I don't think it can be taught in a classroom. Yeah. So there was a leadership class that I had to, and I was like, no, I can't do this. Yeah. I think, so here's my theory on leadership, entrepreneurship, et cetera. And then I'll introduce you. Then I'll ask my first question. So I think I draw an analogy to music. So there are some people that are born with the music gene turned on, and all you got to do is not screw it up. And those are the greats, whether it's the Beethovens, the Bachs, or the Eric Claptons, whoever you want to pick, right? Those are folks that are born and that gene is turned on. The rest of the world, if we put in our 10,000 hours, as they say, we'll be pretty good. We're not going to be like Beethoven. We're not going to be like Eric Clapton, but we'll be pretty good, right? And we can probably make a living at it. But there's certain individuals, if you want to talk about Steve Jobs or, Wozniak or any whoever you want to pick, right? Those folks are anomalies because that gene was turned on. The rest of us, the gene's not turned on, but there's a lot you can do to get yourself to be a reasonable leader, a reasonable entrepreneur, etc. So that's my theory.
I could not, and I'm telling you, I'm my authentic self on these and my own podcast now that I wasn't 3 years ago. But this is that if I I would not talk as much crap. Can we swear on this podcast or no?
I'd rather you didn't, because then I got to put,
great.
I like to keep it clean.
Okay. Or I'll try at least. If that would have been the philosophy in that class, I may have stuck around.
Yeah, there you go.
But that is like, everyone can be a lead. And I'm like, the people everyone's bringing up in this course, right? Like Bill Clinton, Steve Jobs, like you're saying, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos. I'm like, no. These people aren't even like I might never get to that, and I think like I'm the greatest thing to happen to entrepreneurship.
Right.
You know, like, no. Okay, but yeah.
Let's go back to the intro. So today I'm here with Jeremy Redman. So Jeremy, here's my first question for you. If you're at a social event, a networking event, and someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, hey, pleasure to meet you, Jeremy," and they ask you, "What do you do?" How do you answer that question?
I say I entrepreneur. So I entrepreneur and I contribute for Entrepreneur Magazine and a couple other outlets. And what I mean, I guess, then normally they say, what is entrepreneuring, right? And I say, that is me building my third 6-figure company right now, making it 7 figures, close. And they say, what are we doing? What are you doing? And I tell them that our company takes designs and makes mobile apps for people for only $200 a month. And they say, okay, that's amazing. I have an app idea. And then it goes from there.
Perfect.
So building companies, writing, podcasting, those are kind of my outlets and is the bedrock of who I am.
Okay, super. So tell us a little bit about a couple of the companies you currently have.
Yeah, so a couple of the other companies, one that's not around anymore, it was Air 5, and that kind of pivoted maybe 14 different times. We did get that to 6 figures of revenue, and it's a product-based company, so that kind of means something to me.
Sure.
When you sell products and you're establishing a market for those products, be it their digital or physical products, I think that's something more than just like selling the membership course that you're doing or whatever. You're getting these people to sign up for something that's motivation that they could possibly get for free. I just want to make that little distinction that it's a tech company. The second company.
What was the product there? What was the product there, Jeremy?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you. So it started as a digital business card.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up pivoting it into, at one point, it went from a digital business card to like an alumni networking app for alumni groups. Then it went to event organizers. Then it went to an influencer email capture platform. Then it went to a drink subscription where people would meet people and I would pay for their drinks. Okay. And then it went to, what did it end as? I forget but there's like maybe, I pivoted that company 12 to 14 different times. Wow. and monetized it 5 figures a piece at every stage.
Mm-hmm. And was that your first company?
That was my very first company. Yeah. I was really poor when that company started.
And how old are you when you started that company?
26.
Okay.
So even though I was an entrepreneur since birth, I kind of got lost along the way, fell into accounting, and really didn't wake up until my now wife was mentioning that I lost a spark that I once had in college.
Mm.
So that kind of was like, what the heck is that going on? So I left my job making a good amount of money here in Los Angeles and went to work for my first venture-backed startup for $32,000, 60 hours a week, no benefits, no nothing, and loved every second of it. It was a drug for me.
Yeah.
So that's when I knew entrepreneur. I'm back. I'm back in the game.
Yeah.
It just took me a little longer than I thought.
So in that first company, what was the name of it again?
Air 5.
Air 5. Can you pick 1 or 2 or 3 lessons that you learned from that?
People are only as loyal as the amount of money you pay them.
Okay.
So you can get those people for that $32,000, or you can get people for the contract for you for free for a little while, or some even equity. You could throw equity at people and they will only be as loyal for a certain amount of time. There's a formula there. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head. But they will eventually, something will happen and they will give up because they are not intrinsically motivated to the mission of the company like you are or like your business partner is. So you've got to make sure, you've got to like really get good at auditing other people's motivations. That to me is something incredibly, incredibly clear and something I learned growing that company.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because that's kind of interesting, right? So what you're saying is that the founder or the co-founders, they're the ones who really believe in this idea and concept and are willing to put everything on the line, so to speak, to make it happen. And fundamentally, for the most part, 90% of the time, or maybe 95% of the time, other folks are employees. Mm-hmm. And you can buy some loyalty in various different ways. It could be cash compensation. It could be stock options, whatever. It could be a car. But at some point in time, that has a diminishing return.
Absolutely.
And so is this where leadership kind of comes in, sort of how we started this conversation, right? So having strong leadership skills enables you to maybe get more runway
absolutely
out of those stock options or compensation, et cetera.
So I said on one podcast that the mark of a good leader was the ability to get someone to work for free. So if you can actually get someone to, even for a short amount of time, get someone to actually follow you and give you, think about this. Time is the most valued commodity around. Like, you cannot get that time back. So if you can convince anyone by any means to give you their precious commodity of time, you are in a school all your own. Like, getting anyone to do anything in their free, think about this, their free time they're giving you. Mm-hmm. So even if they have like a full-time job and then they choose in their free time to give you 6 hours a day, 5 hours a day, 2 hours a day, man, have you proven something to them that they need to follow you or they need to follow that thing you're building?
Yeah. That
is what I think leadership is. And again, there's a lot of variables and there's a lot of moving parts within that. But if you can, and as I'm thinking this, like, if you can get people to do something, even for like a low wage, mark of a great leader.
Yeah. So as you were saying that, it makes me think back to the first time I read Tom Sawyer, right? And he got all those people to whitewash the fence for free. Yeah. I
what
thought
a
he
great
was,
leader Tom
right.
is.
I thought he was a genius, you know?
It's either that or you're like, you're mind tricking people. Again, that's terrific. If you can Jedi mind trick some people, like, good. Yeah. You're a great leader.
Yeah. So that was company one. And so where did the journey go after that?
So after that company kind of died, maybe, I mean, it never really died, but it kind of morphed into the next thing I did. I started a podcast called Not Boring Business, and I felt like I just needed to make an entity around it, like a brand or whatever. So I started a company called Not Boring Business, LLC. And through that company, we started our first product, which was Business in a Box, late or early last year, so 2018. And through that, we learned a lot about building digital products and SaaS companies. So after we did that, so by the end of last year, we had over 6 figures of revenue in not even a full year. But we were dangerously becoming close to a dev shop, what people would call a dev shop. So it's so weird how each one of my companies has affected the next, but that's kind of how you do it. And then earlier this year, we wanted to productize that company more. And as it morphed, it evolved to more and more and more and be more and more productized. We had to incorporate this new company, V1. So, and then we raised a little venture capital and that's already 6 figures. And we just launched that company in February. Soft launched that company. We're kind of in beta. It's kind of funny, the trickle down of what starting companies from nothing is. It's almost like V1 is just a continuation of my very first company.
Yeah.
But with like everything I've learned in the market. And that's kind of how we focus the products on people is you get your initial build, you'll learn and test the market with that build, and then you come back and add on to your product based on market feedback. That's the best way to do it.
And for these companies, have you had a core group of individuals who have been by your side through this, or how has that evolved?
Yeah, yes and no. I do have like a bench or a roster of people that when I do have money, I go to, and it's kind of buying now their free time. But if I have full-time positions, and this isn't me being overly confident or anything, there are so many people that would quit their job right now to work for me for a decent wage that had worked for me for free in the past.
Yeah.
So I want to prove them all right. There's at least 15 to 20 people that I go, you can help with this and you can help with this. So like, I will just automatically plug them in. So it's great to build that network, and it's great to build kind of like what I call your bench players. The ones that when called upon, they will come and they will perform, become that 6th man of the year.
Yeah. So how do you talk to me a little bit about that process and sort of when you first came to the realization that you could do this and you had this ability and that people were willing to sort of step up to the plate for, below
so from
market.
like okay, yeah, right. So at first, when I was doing things, it's kind of maybe my energetic or my attitude or my charm, whatever you want to call it. A joy to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're an asshole, if you're a jerk,
yes,
right. So there we go. If you're a jerk to people, they won't want to be around you. So I think there's the challenge of having more of an internal ethos where people just kind of want to be around where you are, and then they want to help you do the things you want to do and they almost after many meetings and many times that you have these meetings with these people and they're like, dude, they're constantly comparing you and being in your world means to being in their world and the other people around them. And you almost over time, you build this like FOMO, right? Where these people are almost afraid of missing out of what you're creating and what you're doing in your world. And this is the first time I'm kind of thinking about this, and it sounds brilliant. but I think you're just creating this gravitational force, and eventually people will be attracted to it more and more. But you've got to be careful, because when things get more stressful as a CEO, I almost catch myself losing that likability or that charm or that gravitational force, where I'm thinking to myself, no, like you can't do this, and you're kind of a jerk. And you're like, if you lose that, it's kind of a hard situation to be in, right? Because you want to be a disciplinarian, and it's kind of, once you get people in your company and you allow them to, if they almost frame you as a friend, that's not good either. And I'm learning. So the farther you build in your companies, if they think they always have, it goes back to like, if you think about like the open door policy with a CEO or like any leader, I just don't believe that's a good strategy. I don't believe the whole, these people don't need offices, open office space. I really think that there's a reason there should be a line or a fence around the CEO or the C-suites or these types of people. Until I learn more, there always needs to be some, and maybe this comes across wrong, but like some level of fear, some level of I need to perform to do well, and I need to perform to not like lose my job.
Yeah.
Right. Like, or not hit this and not be able to afford that.
Maybe some other words for that are respect and accountability.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So oftentimes, we're not held. We as an employee are not held accountable, and most of the times, I know when I've screwed up, I was usually the first one to know. Right?
Sure.
Right.
If you're self-aware enough.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, I mean, this whole notion of what you were talking about that what you radiate and transmit what you are feeling inside, right? You're radiating that outside of your body, and other people are picking that up. So if you're grumpy inside, it's going to come out as grumpy, right?
Absolutely.
And this notion of being self-aware enough to say, okay, I'm walking out of my office, I got to put on my happy face. I don't mean it. I don't mean to trivialize it, but I got to put on my happy face because that's the energy and that's the persona I need to transmit to the rest of the individuals in this organization.
I made, so in our last office, I had a door that was right by the exit door, and it was a back door. So I could sneak out if I needed to, or guests could come up and just sneak up to my office. So it's interesting to play on that team dynamic. You want to save face, but sometimes as a CEO, and a CEO with a few employees now, and it's growing, where they're just, if you need to I want to be really real with them, but some people, it's on them if they can take that real feedback or that real, hey, we lost money this week.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to be demoralized, or is that going to motivate you to be better? So I'm kind of learning by trial and error. Part of me is no, I'm weeding out you then. If you're someone if that's going to demotivate you at this stage where we're 10 people, it is constantly where you need to weed out those people and get the best people on staff. Because that kind of stuff early on should motivate you as an early employee at a company.
And it's okay if people leave.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's okay. And to some extent, you hope that individuals can sort of self-select, and the organization can self-select for things that fit within its culture.
I like that. I like how you worded that.
And that's important, and it's okay. This doesn't have to be a place where we have this diversity across personalities that fit in. We don't, it's okay. Right?
I agree with that. I wholeheartedly think that there are certain triggers, and I've never thought about it like this, where the company itself is self-selecting. I really do believe, you hear that if you hire wrong in your early stages of your company, it is more detrimental than anything else.
Because that sets
to the
culture.
Future value. Correct.
Yep.
So I want people to know the culture here is one that it's not intimidating or harassing, but it's it's real, it's authentic. I want people to come here and be motivated. If it is something where we can be friends, but I can tell you where you stand, I think I just don't know if there's a certain amount of people that can handle that. I guess I'm saying there is a certain amount of people that can handle that. It's, can you find those people fast enough while you're growing?
Right.
And then I need to audit myself as a CEO and grow.
Right. Right. I've heard a lot of people talk about businesses as, we're like a family. And I think there's some value to that. However,
sure,
in a family, you don't get to decide who's in the family and who's not. But in a business, you do. So you can apply these family-like relationships, but in a situation where you still get to decide who's in the family and who's not.
Oh, yeah. If we go all in on this, it's like mommy and daddy need their own time, and mommy and daddy have their own offices, their own bedroom.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mommy and dad, there's some things we don't tell the kids.
That's right.
There are a lot of mommy and daddy started this family. You know what I mean? So if we go all in on this, where I just need to start talking to myself as daddy in the company, when I'm fine, and I'm fine with this. So there's a lot of places you can go within that analogy. So do you think that's a good way to approach a startup? Is that family dynamic, or are you just saying that like some people think about it that way?
Well, I think so. Let me talk a little bit about my experience there. So early in my career, I worked at big companies, General Electric and IBM.
Got you.
And work was work and personal life was personal life. And that was sort of the culture in those big companies in the 70s. And so there wasn't a lot of, except for, once a year family picnic with everybody at the company, there really wasn't a lot of interaction. And then I worked and started a couple of smaller companies, entrepreneurial businesses, where we had a lot more of a family-like atmosphere.
Sure.
And I think they both work, but you have to be consistent in the way you approach it. You can't you can't be like family on one day and then the following week sort of oh no we're not family. No, you can't. I'm sorry. You got to be here tomorrow. or whatever,
absolutely.
Right? You can't mix those two environments. You got to decide which one you want, which one works for you, because number one, it'll attract people for whom that environment works, and you got to be consistent about it. So that's how I feel about it. I don't think there's right or wrong. There's the militaristic way of running a business.
Absolutely.
Right?
The machine.
Yeah, and then there's the family business, a way of running it, right? They're very different cultures, very different approaches. They can both build successful businesses and they can both build awful businesses.
Yeah, I agree. Let me take it a step farther though. Like early on, because it evolves in stages, right? Or it changes, or it's dynamic.
Yeah.
So like at this stage, we have to stay consistent for an X amount of time. So if I'm guilty of really doing anything, it's figuring out that culture both within myself and reverberating it through at the stage of company that we're at, and saying, hey, I've had to trade on friendships to do things for cheap, right? Or which I don't really even like to do. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I have limited resources as an entrepreneur. Everyone does. Even if you think you have unlimited resources, you don't. So dynamics change and they become more corporate as you grow as a company. So from now until 10 people, almost everyone is reporting to me, right? And then once you get that 12th, 15th, 20th, you're now thinking there's levels that are being created. So like you almost have like an extended family if we keep going with this thing. Then in 30, you're getting the Christmas card. You know what I mean?
There's family you only see once a year.
Right, exactly. Right. So it's just on holidays you're seeing these family.
When there was 5 of you, you saw each other every day. You had lunch together.
Right.
Every day.
Exactly. We shipped in lunch. We got bagels together. Our thing, Sam's Bagels down the street.
So I've seen that happen numerous times in companies that I've started. And the way I think about it is as organizations get larger, jobs get narrower.
Right.
And those first 5 people who we all had lunch together every day, and that was actually our communication table. That's where everyone knew everything that was going on. And then all of a sudden, once you get to 10 or 15, you can't all have lunch together every day. And all of a sudden, people say, well, I don't know what's going on. Right. And it's a difficult adjustment for some individuals. And your job starts getting narrower and narrower and narrower.
Yeah.
And that's an adjustment.
You start to bring others. And we have it to where like some people get crowded out.
That's right.
Right. Where a lot of people come on and they go, great, I'm doing this cross-functional role. And that's what we need right now. But now we need someone above you, below you, on the side of you that you either need to manage down, manage across, or manage up. So and people only look at like management as one-sided, but it's truly 4 sides, right? You need to manage yourself. You need to manage down. You need to manage across. You need to manage up. So like if on a team of 5, you're only managing yourself, you're kind of screwed when the company grows and now you need to manage down, and then you need to manage out, which is to me, and then you need to manage up, which is to someone else. So like there's always external stakeholders and values that need to be approached. And if you can't stick with it, you kind of get replaced. And other people look at it as like a bad thing. I look at it as just like a necessary thing. Like either adapt or die, I guess. It's kind of the evolution.
Well, I also think there's this self-awareness element to this. And what I mean by that is I know for myself, I'm very good in working in organizations that are like less than 50 people. Right?
Yeah.
1 to 50, maybe 75, right? I'm good at that. And I'm good at some place where there's 10 or 20,000 people. But in between those, I have a hard time. I mean, I've just learned that over the years, that I can thrive in really small intimate places, and I can thrive in big organizations because I can figure out how to maneuver around those big, massive places and get stuff done.
Isn't that, I mean, legally, when you hit 50 people, just regulations change.
That's right.
So like, that's probably the worst ball game to be in, is 50 to 1,000 people.
I think you're right.
Like it is the most, that's where CEOs get replaced. That's where everything starts to become more corporate, more structured, more by the book, more manualed. I've seen this happen where you start to get iBanking people that want to be your CFO, right? Where the VCs come in and clean house, and they want to put a board member and an observer at your meetings. It's these types of things that happen, that kind of, and now you're like, whoa, there's levels at, oh, you can't get to the CEO, and it's like, yeah, dude, you're employee 30, and now we're up to 300. You've stayed where you're at, but I've got to adapt. It's just time as well. So like everyone's role is kind of increasing, but it's going way more deep and increasing as a result. So it's just very funny to see that between 50 and 1,000 people, or 50 and 250 and 500 and 1,000. It just the complexity there, and it kind of becomes a stable. And to your other point, when you hit thousands of employees, it's almost the structure's there. Everyone knows, everyone is lockstep. It's a machine that's working now. That's why it takes those companies that have thousands of employees really, really long time to get back or react to market forces.
Right.
To like adapt their product, because it goes through 18 levels of command.
That's right.
And it's easier for startups, the people that are below 50 employees, to move and compete.
That's right. But I also think that another important element of this conversation is that as an individual, know your sweet spot. And you may be an individual, you know what works for me is startup up to 50 people. And then after that, it's time for me to leave and go find another startup to join. And that's okay. And for other people, it's, I don't want to work in a company unless there's at least 10,000 employees. And they're both okay.
To each his own.
Exactly.
I'm saying that like I've once said to myself, once we get an HR person, I want to sell it, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like once you start getting that kind of structure, but it is around 40, 50 people.
Right.
And then another part of me gets jealous when I see someone ringing the bell at NYSE and going, I would love to take a company from nothing to public. That would be cool.
I agree with you, but that's also the back to the way we started this conversation 30 minutes ago. That's the Beethoven, right? Because it's the very, very rare individual who's there from startup to ringing the bell. And you can name them on one hand probably, right? There's not a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they're very, it's the person where that gene was turned on, and they're pretty rare. But we all idolize those folks because we think, oh, look that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
And that may be the ultimate for them, but not the ultimate for me.
Is it a bad thing because when people say, oh, it's not good to be like, I like how you said idolized. You got to be idolized. It's never about money for me, but man, when I hear you say that, I'm like, I want to be idolized as an entrepreneur. I want I want to be an idle entrepreneur for people. You know what I mean? Like, is that a bad thing? You can't tell me money's a bad motivator and then I want to be idolized is a bad thing, right? Is that bad? You tell me.
I don't know I don't know, but I think there's the way that I characterize it is I would like to be a role model for people. I think which is slightly different than being idolized.
Okay, that sounds like semantics. You want to be an idol too. I feel. No,
I think an idol does no wrong.
In their own head or in like other people's?
In other people's heads.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right? I think an idol does no wrong. Or you got to do some really bad stuff before you lose your crud, right? But I think to me, a role model is slightly different than being an idol.
I feel like a role model, though, is almost, it puts you in a category where like you don't do anything wrong.
No, I disagree.
Oh, all right.
I disagree 100%, man. There's plenty of role models that I think that have fallen flat on their faces because they screwed up. But the question is then what do you do?
I'm a good role model.
The important thing is what do you do after you screw up?
Got you. Sure. I normally I want to answer that for a sec. Normally when I mess up, I really try to cop to it really fast and know that like I messed up. We failed this customer. We failed this person. Let's refund them that month, even though we don't give refunds. Let's try to make this better. Sometimes you just can't make them happy. And like, those are those weed clients that you need to just like weed out. At the same time, you kiss a few frogs before you get to your prince, right?
Yep. And
it's just a natural.
And I think that by refunding that money to that customer that, you didn't have to, that's when you develop a customer for life. And that's when you develop loyalty.
Maybe.
I think it is.
Sure.
Right. You're certainly not going to develop it if you don't refund it.
Yeah.
Right. So you're at a crossroads there. The choice is refund or not. You don't refund it. You're not getting a customer for life. If you do, at least you have a probability, probably better than 50-50, that you will get a customer for life.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, right. 50-50.
Right.
You're sure. You get some probability. All right. I'll see you there.
Those are good odds. I'll take those.
I'll take 50-50 on losing a couple $100.
And I think that's one of the things, I've had a few experiences in my life where companies have really done good. In other words, they've gone above and beyond what they had to do. When I bought something and something broke or, it was outside the warranty period or whatever.
Yeah.
And I have become loyal customers to those brands.
Got you. No, I agree. Every time I walk into the Apple store with my headphones that have clearly been sweated all over, and they give me a new pair back because they don't work, I'm a Apple customer for life.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just funny that early in a stage, when you're vehemently fighting some of these customers, like, oh my gosh, we did XYZ just like you said. And they come back and are like, no, but I said this. And it's like, you didn't go through the process. That's why I got lost. And you're like, they're still upset.
That's right.
And it's like, you can't really afford to give hundreds of dollars back, but you're like, we have to.
Right.
Like, or do you go back and forth with someone who clearly did something wrong? So it's like, I don't know, role model or idol.
Good customer service. Because I think you have to remember that in that moment in time for that customer, and they're complaining about something to you, you walk into the Apple store with your headphones that don't work anymore. At that moment in time, that's the most important thing in your life.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely.
So
I agree with it completely.
So if you as the company can do good by that, I'll say the word advantage of that situation, if you will.
Right.
Right. That's where I think you can build loyalty, you can build real brand awareness, and you can build customers that'll keep coming back over and over and over again. And if you look at these companies that do that kind of stuff, like an Apple, like a Patagonia, the list goes on, they build that into their pricing.
I agree with you.
It's a strategy.
Yes.
It's a strategy.
Correct.
They're not the low cost. They're not the low cost seller of those goods and services, right?
You're right.
They build it into their pricing because they say, we know we're going to do this. And this is how, this is what we want to be.
That might be the most valuable piece on any podcast I've been on in the last several weeks. That is the most valuable piece of advice. I've come across and say, hey, we can do your app for the most affordable price that no one will be able to touch. And people still want the service of the $50,000 app. And I go, that's almost impossible, but we're trying. So let's work together. Let's focus on this. Let's do this together. Let's have an agreement, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're getting on at this beta stage. We're helping you. You will have your app out. You will be able to test the market with it. And it's funny to hear it in that context.
Well, you have to decide whether, you have to decide on what
them prices, baby,
what your value add is. And if you want to compete on price, boy, that's a glide path to going out of business.
Oh, sure. No, I get it. Yeah. And it's not that cheap either. It's still like a few $100s a month.
Yes.
So but it's still just cheaper. And you want to know what's funny is what happened 2 months ago, we released a premium package at $1,000 a month. More people have been interested in the $1,000 package than they have been at the $300. And you want to know who we hear the most complaints from? The $300
ones.
Right. So, there is a law out there. There is a law of pricing pages where put your price. There's a SaaS thing one of my mentors told me. When in doubt, double or something. Mm-hmm. Double the price of your set. I don't forget what it was exactly. But and he'll be upset at me. But it's like you charge $600. And then you can either negotiate $100 down or do whatever just to figure out where that price point is. And then most people will just pay it. And I'm like, oh man. So we did that and boom, there you go. Most people are paying $1,000.
Yeah. Again, you want to be Walmart, or do you want to be Macy's, or do you want to be Neiman Marcus?
Right. I don't know. I think
they're all viable markets.
Absolutely. Right. And I wouldn't mind being any one of them.
So you just got to figure out what you want to be, and then you got to stick to your guns.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what we're figuring out right now, which is I also think it's a very interesting place to be in. Like, this is what makes entrepreneurship really, really fun for me, is being able to figure out what you want to be, where you want to go, what you want your brand to be, what you want your pricing to be, testing the market to figure out how elastic it is. These types of things, real world, right, outside of the books, outside of the learnings, the courses, just doing it is more valuable than anything out there.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, we've been at this 40 minutes, and so I want to slowly start wrapping it up. So what's next for you?
I think, I'll start with what's current. So what's current is I'm going through this stage where I literally believe the sky is falling. And I at the same time, I think, oh my gosh, based on our traction and based on where we're customer sentiment with investor sentiment, we're $1 billion company. Like, it's that devilish dance of entrepreneurship and the stage we're at, where I don't really have anyone to go to. I'm a single founder. I'm building this company where I'm on a daily basis. I think, okay, we're screwed. The ship's going down. And then at the end of the day, I'm thinking, oh man, based on like 2 or 3 triggers, I'm like, we're a $1 billion company. Like, oh my God, these people want to invest $500,000 these people want to invest $1.5 million. Oh my God, these customers just bought. We had a $15,500 day in recurring. So like, there's so many things that are actually, we signed this contract with a Fortune 100 company, all these things that happen. So I'm thinking you're going to see me in New York. We'll grab coffee, and I'll be ringing the bell at the NYSE.
All right. I like that image.
I'm putting it into the universe.
Yeah. You want to put a time scale on that sucker?
4 years.
Okay.
4 years. we're gonna come. We're gonna come back, and I will still be CEO, and we will take this bugger public.
Yeah, you broke up again. I'm
what do you
sorry,
think about that,
Jeremy? The last thing I heard.
I am coming to New York. We're gonna grab coffee. I'm setting it right now. 4 to 5 years. 4 to 5.
Yeah.
I'm holding myself. I'll be in New York. Me and you will be clanking coffee cups, and I will then leave you to go ring the bell at the NYSE.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Right from Jeremy's mouth direct to your ears. We're going to hold them to it now, man.
All right.
It's now forever embodied, and hundreds of thousands of people will have listened to this.
Yeah. Amen.
All
Amen.
right.
Here's your idol.
Yeah.
Ring the bell.
So, hey, Jeremy, is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't? Anything else you want to add to this?
No. You were this is a great interview. This is a great job. You've done a great job with this.
Well, thank you very much.
I like the flow.
Yeah, it was a good kind of rambling conversation. And
part of the reason why I like podcasts is because I regret not recording more of my rambling conversations with people at coffee houses.
Yeah.
And when I walk away with something like this, I feel like there was one of those lightning in a bottles.
Well,
like,
great. That's
this was good.
Gracious of you to say that.
Structure, and I love this as far as how you guided everything. I could learn a little lessons from you, so I appreciate your guidance, my good sir.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast. You were a great guest, and I can echo all the things you just said about our conversation as well. So,
cool, thanks.
Yep, and 4 to 5 years, New York Stock Exchange, ringing the bell. Be there.
Boom.
Jeremy Redman. Thanks. Hey, Mike. So I thought that was a great conversation. And so what do you think about Jeremy's take on leadership? What are your thoughts regarding leadership?
He made a lot of really interesting and thought-provoking points, Bella. And you're right. You, too, sure covered a lot of ground. It's this whole idea, can you learn to be a leader? And I, love the challenges that he threw up there about classes in leadership and the value of those. And I guess my thinking of this has evolved over time. And, my sense is, I guess when I was his age, and even up until recently, I thought, leadership class is a waste of time. There's no point in learning leadership theories or even best practices. And until I met somebody a few years ago who really, I thought, taught leadership really well, and I'm changing my tune. So I think a great leadership class is important. And because I totally agree that you learn leadership by doing it. But what you can develop is a structured framework for kind of understanding the knowledge and skill set that you need to be a leader. And by that I mean communication and motivation and having a vision and getting people around you to learn and learning yourself and knowing, we see this a lot these days, knowing when to apologize and how to apologize, how to make decisions, how to engage with your employees, or your customers, your suppliers. All these things are part of being a great leader. And you can't learn that in a classroom. But you can kind of start to understand, I think, and have a framework in your own mind of the different components of leadership, where you sit. And I guess to me, it's not having one set of leadership skills, it's having a range and then figuring out the context in which you need to apply a specific leadership skill or tool in a specific situation. And I think a classroom can be really good to organize those thoughts and practice so that when you get into a situation, you're prepared. You have a framework in your mind. You've done some role playing. You have kind of a path, and you still have to always react and adjust and things like this, but it kind of gives you this framework. And so there are some really good leadership teachers that I saw do that for students. And like, here's how to be a good leader. Here's how to observe leadership. And here's how to understand the situations in which leadership is needed. And when you take from your toolkit what you've got, then you can apply with maximum efficiency the mix of knowledge and skills to best suit a given situation. So I totally agreed with what he said about leadership, but to me, that's what I would evolve what he said. That's how kind of I've been thinking about it over the last 25 years that I've been an academic and been a business person. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things I'll riff on a little bit about what you said. One of them is that I think you do need to practice, just like you said, and you can develop these tools, or you can obtain these tools by reading books, going to classes, etc. But I also think that, at least for my experience, I've been in various different leadership roles. Some of them were in organizations that I helped start. Other ones were I parachuted into an organization and was designated the leader. And I think one of the important skills is sort of reading the audience. In other words, reading the organization and understanding what motivates the organization, what's important to the members of that organization, what do they cherish, what are things that will be very challenging to change, what other things are more changeable, and then very importantly, sort of adapting your skill set so that it works within that organization. Because as I reflect back, I used very different types of leadership styles in different organizations, not just dependent upon the organization, but also dependent upon the situation that organization was in at that period of time or that moment in time. In some of those instances, quick action was a necessity. There was a crisis that you're solving. And the tool set that I use in a crisis is slightly different than a tool set when there is no crisis. Or what's the degree and sense of urgency that you need in the things that you're trying to accomplish. So I think, those are, again, things that you can learn, and they are things that you can develop a set of tools, like you said so eloquently, Mike, that you can then build on and use and practice. So that's my 2 cents.
What about when the organization that you're in changes? So I totally agree with what you're saying, Bela. Different organizations have different needs, and you got to read those. And if you make a mistake, there's a big cost to that, right? But what about as your organization grows or shrinks or pivots? Same deal or different?
You got to modify. I mean, and I can tell you this, when a couple of companies we started with 3 of us or 4 of us, and we grew to 60, 70 people. Almost 100 in one of them. And I remember that, for the first 6 months, when there was 10 people or less, we had lunch together every day. And that was our communication channel. That's how stuff got done, got communicated. Well, once there was 20 people, we couldn't have lunch together every day. And all of a sudden, your communication channels change. And you start putting in other people that are responsible for areas. You start designating individuals. And as I said in my conversation with Jeremy, as organizations grow, most jobs, most positions get narrower. They have a narrower focus. The CEO's position keeps broadening, broader and broader and broader. But most other jobs or positions get narrower in what they do. And so that's not only adjustment for the people who are involved in that, and their jobs are getting narrower, because if they've been there since day one, they're going, well, wait a minute, I used to do all of these things, and now I only do 2 of them. Well, I have this feeling of I'm losing stuff. But as a CEO, you go from managing individuals who are performing work to managing managers, and you know how the organization grows. And the skill set you need, I think, is really different. That's why there's very few individuals who stay in a CEO or presidential position from day one till IPO. That's a rare individual who can adapt their skill set and their leadership as that organization grows in that size. So I think it's very dynamic. It's very fluid. And that's the challenge. It's figuring out what you need to do today and tomorrow, because it's probably different than what you did last week.
Yeah, situational awareness and awareness of change. And yeah, there's no textbook that says, here's how to do this. So
exactly.
Cool. What about culture? Let's switch topics for a second, because they're really, in my view, very related. But Jeremy said some interesting things about the culture of the organization. What's your take on that?
Well, I think culture is extremely important. If you're starting a business, you have an opportunity to sort of establish that the way you want. If you're joining an existing organization, it probably already has some sort of culture. So you have to figure out how to work within it. You got to, again, figure out what things are sacred that cannot be changed, what things can be changed. And I think you also, if you want a particular type of culture, family style or militaristic style or something in between, and even within those styles, there's various different flavors. I think you have to work at maintaining it. I think it's a constant effort to keep reinforcing that this is the culture we want. We want to empower people. You just can't say it once a year at the annual company meeting. You have to keep saying it and doing it over and over and over and over again. And it's not just saying it; it's saying it and doing it. If you want,
and evaluating it and rewarding.
That's right. Exactly right. So if you want to empower people, you just can't say, okay, all of you are now empowered. From this day forward, everyone in the organization is empowered. That's a good statement, but it's not a sufficient statement to do that. You have to change behaviors, and changing behaviors is I think one of the most difficult things there is in leadership and management.
Yeah, and that means you got to figure out how to measure some of these things. And I totally understand that there's certain things about culture that are difficult or impossible to measure, but you got to get some things measured so you can evaluate and reward people on it. Period.
Yep, absolutely. And there are tools that help you do that. You know, there are experts who you can hire, if you will, to help you put together ways of managing that, ways of evaluating and getting feedback. Because there's the culture that I think the organization has and that I get to experience as the president or CEO. And then there's all the other cultures that I don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
Subcultures. The subcultures. Yep. Exactly. So how do you figure that stuff out? You know, so oftentimes they say that, you know, especially as an organization grows in size, the CEO knows the least about what's actually going on in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a challenging thing to work through.
Yeah. So these are interesting kind of concepts that Jeremy talked about. So from the eyes of a serial entrepreneur, really, I liked his story about how he got out, went to accounting. His now wife said, "You've lost something." And he said, "I got to get back in it." I thought that was pretty cool. But so here he is, you know, he's learned these cool lessons about leadership and about culture, and they fed into, you know, he said a couple times, my latest company is the amalgamation of everything that I've done so far, both in terms of product, but it was very clear both he's learned some interesting lessons about leadership and culture along the way. And I thought it was great that you got him to, in a really neat back and forth, to elucidate some of his lessons learned over time. I don't know. How do you want to wrap this up, Baylor? What do you think are the big takeaways?
Well, let me see. I think one of them is you got to figure out what your leadership style is. You have to be sensitive and tuned into what leadership style the organization you are now part of is receptive to and will work within that organization. And again, this is not a static thing. It's a dynamic thing. It changes with time. So I think you really need to you have to have good antenna. You have to have good reception and have a good sense of what's going on in the organization. And then distill that down into specific actions that can help move that organization forward. And I think that's really what leadership is. And it's different in various different organizations and points in time. I don't know. That's my 2 cents. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. As my good friend Farzad Mahmoudi, who's a professor at Clarkson, likes to say about supply chains, one size doesn't fit all. The same holds for leadership and culture. It's one size doesn't fit all. And the better you are at reading the situation and adapting, the more successful you're going to be. And yeah, you have to have that core, you have to stand for something, but you got to be adaptable and flexible too. And that balance of core values and integrity and honesty and transparency has to be balanced with the ability to dart and weave along the margins as the conditions change.
Yeah, agreed. You want to wrap this one up, Mike?
Sure. Listeners, thanks for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this and found it interesting and thought-provoking as we did. As normal, we have two small requests. First, if you have any questions about what we discussed today, suggestions about future topics or potential guests, please get in touch. Our email is bela.and.mike@gmail.com. And second, if you like what we're doing here, please hit subscribe or like on your podcast app. And even might want to be radical and write us a quick review. That would be fantastic. And if you know other people that might be interested in what we're talking about, please share us with them.
Thank you for spending time with us this week. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode. So signing off from upstate New York, this is Bela. Hey, Mike, see you next week.
Thanks, Bela. See ya.
This podcast is produced for Mike and I by our friends at Busy Media of Schenectady, New York. They can be found at busymedia.co.